Over the past couple weeks, you may have seen the phrase Uncanny Valley thrown around a lot more than usual. I wonder why that is. The biggest piece of criticism for the Lion King remake, aside from why is this happening and who asked for this, is closely tied to this term. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Now, it's funny because the second I started writing this, they released a trailer to the movie musical Cats, which is truly on a whole other extreme level of Uncanny Valley, to the point where it seems kinda ridiculous for me to make the Lion King the focus of this video when it is nowhere near as guilty of, well, this. However, I don't discuss movies I haven't seen yet, so remind me to make a part 2 of this video at the end of the year when Cats comes out. In 1970, Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori published an article with a hypothesis that as robots are given more human features, they appear more familiar to us. That is, up until a certain point is reached where the mix of extreme likeness but also subtle differences and imperfections invokes a negative reaction within us, because at this point it starts to look eerie, unnatural, strange, uncanny. This is the Uncanny Valley, and the observation led him to believe that roboticists should not attempt to make their creations overly lifelike in appearance and motion. This feeling doesn't just apply to robots. If you've ever been weirded out by certain dolls or clowns, it's likely the same thing. And when it comes to film, it's with how the character is designed. It's not always a bad thing. In fact, many times, particularly with horror and sci-fi, they can deliberately make the characters appear this way because making us uncomfortable is the exact response they're seeking. The people involved with Ex Machina designed Ava specifically to invoke an Uncanny Valley feeling. Your stereotypical robot movements like that of C-3PO don't invoke this because they are so far off from how humans move. With Ava, Alicia Vikander made her movements so smooth and lifelike while also making sure that there is something off about it, so that she sits in this zone. On the other hand, sometimes it is not at all intentional and is instead a result of poor character design, bad costuming, or horrible CGI. The Sonic the Hedgehog movie being one of the best, most recent examples of this, where a human-like body shape covered in blue fur with human teeth and creepy eyes created such a negative reaction that the movie, which was supposed to come out this year, has been postponed to 2020 so that they can redesign Sonic. So where does The Lion King fit into this? This isn't a cat situation where Donald Glover and Beyonce are acting it out and digital fur technology is added onto their bodies. The characters are just impeccably done CGI lions that look exactly like real lions. When the first trailer dropped, no one mentioned anything weird or uncanny about it. It was stunning. But when we eventually did get to see short clips of the lions speaking,
"Seeing you again? You don't know what this will mean to everyone."
something felt really off about it. The mix of hyper-realistic animals that aren't emoting and human voices that are emoting takes it into Uncanny Valley territory. Of course, not everyone feels this way. I'm sure many don't care and aren't fazed by this, but for me and many others, it was a pretty big hindrance to the movie, and I'll explain why. I by no means hated this remake. I wholeheartedly believe that the creatives involved in making it cared about the story and wanted to do justice to the original. That being said, what should have been the best scenes in the movie fell flat for me, mostly because of this Uncanny Valley problem.
Simba.
And it is directly a result of decisions they made that could have been avoided. For a movie that looks so lifelike, it also feels like the life has been sucked out of it. This is most apparent with the scenes that should evoke the most emotion. Take the stampede, for example. The shot of the wildebeest running into the gorge looked just as realistic and incredible as I hoped it would. But it's not just the image of a lion cub and his dad trying to survive amongst a giant herd of wildebeest that makes the animated version one of the most emotional scenes in any Disney movie. It's carried on what these characters are feeling, which is told, obviously, through the expressions on the characters' faces. The panic in Simba's face when he can't find his dad, the relief when he thinks he survived, and the horror at seeing him fall. The sinister look when Scar says, "Long live the king." The look of sheer terror in Mufasa's eyes at the realization of what his own brother is about to do to him. These are all vital in making this scene what it is, yet these expressions are non-existent in the remake. Scar just delivers the line with so much less drama than smacks Mufasa in the face and he falls off. I really wish I had the scene on hand so I can contrast the two in this video.
That stampede scene, I mean, that's upsetting enough in the Disney version, isn't it? When did you first kind of see that coming together? And are you slightly concerned it's going to scar a whole new generation of kids?
It's such a strange thing in a way, because I feel like that the animated version, for some reason, is kind of so visceral, like, and it's sort of, whereas in a way, you know, there's something slightly more subtle about that bit. I think slightly gentler for that reason, actually, in this version, that it's not quite as I don't know, as I suppose as brutal in a way.
Even though I'm sure Chiwetel meant that in a good way, I completely agree with what he said there, but in a bad way. This version of the movie feeling less visceral is exactly my problem with it. The father-son relationship that was brutally cut short is the emotional core of the movie. And when that emotion is not shown in the faces of the characters, it feels very bland. It's then made worse when the voice acting is added on top of that, because this is of course a very talented list of actors who did deliver with their performances, but it's strange hearing these performances overlaid on animals not showing the same level of emotion. When Simba is crying over the death of his father, you can hear the devastation in his voice.
It was a stampede. He tries to save me. It was an accident. What am I gonna do?
But what you're seeing is just a lion cub that isn't portraying that on its face. There's a big disconnect between the two, compared with the animation where the visual matches exactly what you're hearing.
Wildebeest, he tried to save me. It was an accident. I didn't mean for it to happen.
This isn't the case with all characters. Like, I don't feel this way about Timon, who is easily the highlight of the film for me. Pumbaa too. I think partly what really helps in this case is meerkats are just as funny in real life as they are in animation, given their size and overall nature. Like, there's a moment where they show a close-up of Timon's face and everyone laughed, not necessarily because he was doing anything funny, but just looking at him is funny enough. Adding Billy Eichner on top of a little animal that's scurrying all over the place is perfect casting and worked really well. The Uncanny Valley problem also isn't there throughout the movie. I did get used to it at several points. I thought I would be a lot more bothered with Zazu's beak just moving up and down as he speaks, but it wasn't that bad. However, the points where it bothered me with the lions and where it was most noticeable was unfortunately always during what should have been the most emotional scenes in the movie. People's snarky response in defense of the movie tends to be, well, what do you expect? Lions can't emote, which I think is a cop-out. This isn't a documentary and it isn't something like Homeward Bound where real animals are being filmed. This is CGI. If they wanted them to emote, they could have easily done that and still make the lions look real. We've seen a ton of CGI animals in movies that show real emotion, Paddington being my favorite example of this. Despite him being a walking, talking bear that looks really realistic, there's nothing weird about seeing him speak because his facial expressions match exactly what he's saying and how he's feeling. Real-life bears can't emote the way Paddington does, but that doesn't make Paddington any less believable as a bear. And it doesn't make the CGI any less impressive, it makes it more so. I really wish they went in a similar direction, but they didn't, and it must have been a conscious decision not to. Which brings me to what I think is the crux of the problem, and that is, their commitment to photorealism went way overboard. I get it, this is a remake. They are already copying so much directly from the animation that if Jon Favreau wanted his movie to feel special and stand out, making it look like you're genuinely watching the African savannah is what they had to do. And I'm not arguing against that part of it. There were scenes in this that looked so real and so stunning that it literally made my jaw drop, especially seeing the night sky completely covered in stars. I loved that, and sometimes this commitment to realism made them get creative. Like, sure, we didn't get to see Timon dress in drag and do the hula, but the alternative of him singing Be Our Guest was just as funny and caught me by surprise. Or like, in the original, how Rafiki finds out Simba is alive is just through a bunch of leaves traveling from Simba to him, and then he does some voodoo stuff. In the remake, I really like how we went through a little journey, seeing a piece of Simba's mane travel from bird to tree to giraffe to dung beetle to ant then to Rafiki. You get to experience much more of the animal kingdom and details of the landscape in this version, and I like that. But when I say they overly committed to this idea of photorealism, I obviously don't mean that I hate how great the CGI is and how realistic it all looks. It's that this commitment prevented them from straying outside that box and having fun with the movie. There's a quote from the IndieWire review that perfectly explains how I feel. The Lion King demands that we suspend our disbelief at the same time that it tries to convince us that we don't have to. And the resulting dissonance is so draining that it becomes hard to remember how special the story once felt. They didn't have to do it like this. This is a movie with talking animals and musical numbers. They needed to give themselves room to stray from photorealism during the scenes that needed it most. And doing so wouldn't make the CGI any less impressive and it wouldn't make it less stunning. Letting the animals show the emotion that the voice acting demands would eliminate this uncanny valley feeling. Letting the characters and landscape do more than just run around during the musical numbers would inject life into this movie that was desperately needed. In the original, when I Just Can't Wait to Be King is sung, it's not just that it's a great catchy song which makes the scene, it's also the animation style that changes and you're plunged into a colorful world with surreal visuals that goes perfectly with the song. You get taken into Simba and Nala's mischievous and childlike world that is really fun to watch. Whereas in the remake, they just run around the watering hole. And something I kept thinking, aside from how boring it was all the wasted potential. It also made me think of Mary Poppins Returns. If you haven't seen it, there is one scene or section in the movie in particular that gets a lot of praise from people, even those that didn't like the movie. And that is when the children were taken into a world of a ceramic bowl. The integration of 2D animation among the live action was incredible and so impressive. It doesn't take you out of the movie, it does the opposite. It becomes so much more immersive. I'm not necessarily saying that I wanted them to do exactly the same thing here, but it just shows the world of possibilities they had in making the musical numbers creative and interesting. They didn't even let themselves change it up for just a single song. A song about a kid fantasizing about the day he gets to be king. The same applies for Can You Feel the Love Tonight. In the original, that whole scene takes place during sunset and twilight because, you know, it's literally in the title of the song. Whereas in the remake, it takes place during the afternoon and the setting isn't anywhere near as beautiful or romantic as it should be. Simba and Nala are again just running around the place, not doing much else. No cheeky smiles, no cheeky close-up looks, because they insisted on it looking like we're watching an episode of Planet Earth. I thought for sure we'd at least get to see them tackle each other into the river and get to see what their fur looks like in a different state, like King Paddington gets all the time. But nope, it's just a very boring scene because they've boxed themselves in with always choosing photorealism over anything even slightly more interesting. To end this video, I'll talk about the character that I think was most negatively impacted by this unnecessary obligation to photorealism, and that is Scar. What makes Scar such a great villain is not just that he killed his own brother, it's his personality and how over the top he is.
Sarabi and I didn't see you at the presentation of Simba.
That was today? Oh, I feel simply awful.
But because of their duty to having it look so real, his personality had to be toned down significantly.
Meticulous planning, tenacity spanning. Meticulous planning, tenacity spanning.
This isn't a knock on Chiwetel Ejiofor, who was really good in the role, and it's not at all his fault. It's the fault of photorealism. They can't have him sing Be Prepared with the same sort of flamboyant nature of the original because, as established, they don't want the lions to be expressive. So overlaying an extremely expressive song over an expressionless lion would make the Uncanny Valley problem so much worse. The result is a villain that is stripped of all that chaotic evil energy, and we're instead left with one that just has a single emotion: anger. In conclusion, I do really admire the technological achievements of the Lion King remake. I have loved the original for literally all my life. It came out before I was born and I've lost count of how many times I've seen it. And even though I would much rather they leave the original to stand on its own, if there had to be a remake, I'm glad it wasn't a complete and total disaster, and that it had some redeeming qualities. But the movie still has major problems that prevent me from giving this a high rating. And what's most disappointing about it is that these aren't accidents. The problems are a result of decisions they made, and had they just given themselves the space to experiment beyond photorealism, particularly with making expressive yet realistic animals, I think this remake could be a million times better. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it. Please thumbs up if you did and subscribe if you're new here. Follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up to date with my opinions and what I'm working on. Again, thanks for watching, bye.
Meow?